So I've stated this online many times and to people, countless people for the many, many years, and I've written about it. But anyways, let's make an official video about it. How alcoholics and drug users, many of them started off on prescription pills as teenagers and young adults. Prescription pills because they were labeled mentally ill. Prescription pills that have side effects, countless side effects. Now, if you have ever educated yourself about prescription pills, you will know that there's about 30 side effects, dangerous side effects to prescription pills. Suicide ideation is one. Suicide ideation for antidepressants and mental illness pills. And if that's not alarming to you, then what is? Then what is? And then, let's also talk about how foster children are known to be troubled children, traumatized children, and they're constantly labeled mentally ill, thrown on pills, prescription pills that once again, antidepressants and mental illness pills, once again with suicide ideation, depression, countless disturbing side effects. And most people don't read them. Most people don't care about the side effects. They either don't care or they read them and, whatever. And but we're going to pretend that these parents and teachers and other people and psychiatrists and judges aren't predatory upon children. You're going to pretend they're not criminal and evil and narcissistic and misogynistic and psycho and narcissistic. You're going to pretend they're not just plain evil and criminal. That encourage parents to label their children mentally ill and put them on prescription pills are no different than street drugs, because again, anyone that's educated on prescription pills will know that they're different than than illegal drugs such as heroin and meth. Okay? Meth, coke, and heroin. If you're going to pretend that prescription pills are no different, yes, they are. And if you didn't know that, that means you're uneducated. And most people probably do already know about it. That means they're educated, they just don't give a fuck. They don't give a fuck. That it's the prescription pills that landed alcoholics and drug users into the addictions that they have. And also pain pills given after people's surgeries in a hospital. Again, prescription pills for a surgery that most people didn't know were addictive pills. Because, once again, they didn't educate themselves. They were trusting a doctor, putting their whole trust in a doctor that didn't give a fuck about anything but money and greed and image. Okay? Pretending like he's saving people and he's the hero of people when he's actually destroying people because they get hooked on drugs, then they turn to illegal drugs, which is actually no different than prescription pills. And society wants to pretend that judges and lawyers and psychiatrists are not psycho, evil, narcissistic, misogynistic, mentally ill. You're going to pretend that when kids are taken from people because they're an alcoholic or a drug user, you're going to pretend that when kids are kidnapped from them, that's normal. You're going to pretend the government gives a shit about addiction when they're profiting off of the sales of alcohol, cigarettes, and drugs. And it's a fact. And then they kidnap their children. And no, for a fact, the truth is, Division of Children and Family Services, CPS, DCFS, they do not help parents or children. If they helped them, they wouldn't be threatening to adopt their child up for 18 years. Adoption would never be an option, ever, in a DCFS case, if you actually cared about families, parents, and children in America. Especially when in the state of Utah, your DCFS judges are Mormon. Your cops are Mormon. Your DCFS, many workers are Mormons. And you're going to pretend they give a fuck about families, children, and parents? No, they don't. When they're ripping their children away from them, kidnapping the children away from their parents for using drugs or alcohol or prescription pills. And a lot of them were hooked first on prescription pills. And you're going to pretend the government actually gives a shit about addiction when they're profiting off of the sales of alcohol, cigarettes, and drugs, prescription pills, psychiatrists, and doctors. judges are clearly, DCFS are clearly getting paid when they're ripping children away from the parents. They're clearly getting paid to rip children away from parents. Because why do you need to falsely accuse people? Or why would you even need to rip a child away from their parent to begin with? A real parent in trouble would be taking classes or getting rehab. But again, the government doesn't give a fuck about people taking classes and go to rehab. They don't give a fuck. They only give a fuck about ripping the children away for 18 years. Traumatizing children. And if you're going to pretend that the government gives a shit about crimes and trauma, then they wouldn't be ripping children away from their parents. Ever. 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 In adoption. Through adoption. And threatening adoption. Adoption would never be an option if you actually gave a shit about children, parents, crime, addictions, because 70 to 80% of criminals were a foster child at one time. That means something. That means something to intellects. 70 to 80% of prisoners were a foster child. Prison equals murder and high-end crimes. And if you're going to pretend that they didn't have different issues before a murder or a serious crime, once again, you're going to pretend the government gives a shit about crime. If they gave a shit about crime, they wouldn't be traumatizing children for no reason and kidnapping them from their parents for 18 years. You wouldn't. Adoption would never, ever be used. That term would never be used in a division of children and family court hearing if you actually gave a shit about children, family, crime, or addictions. Because what is the, are you guys going to pretend that trauma isn't the number one indicator of addiction? Because yes, it is. So when you traumatize children or parents, yes, addiction is the number one indicator. Trauma is the number one indicator of addiction. And anybody that knows anything about trauma and addiction and crime, they're all correlated. Mental illness, all correlated. They are related. Now, there's endless people, countless people that are straight up criminals, sadistic and disgusting and evil, and lie up their asses, pretending like these are not all related subjects, when yes, they are.